Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show where we talk about short video games, the kind of thing that you can complete in an evening or a weekend, video games that respect your time. I'm your host, Reagan Kelly, and I am joined by awesome co-hosts Nate Heininger. How are you doing, Nate?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
And Laura Nash. How are you?
I'm pretty great.
And we are talking this week about a topic that we've talked about before. This has become a sort of a tradition. In fact, this is the third year in a row that we've done an episode covering the games that have won Apple Design Awards for this year, the 2016 Apple Design Awards.
3 times. 3 years. Crazy.
I didn't even realize. It felt like we hadn't been doing the podcast that long at all. But one of the earliest things we did was this. So we haven't been doing this thing quite 3 years yet, but we almost.
Yeah, and the reason we do this is obviously Reagan and I met in an Apple store. I think that we both worked there. I think Apple plays a pretty big part in our gaming lives. And this tends to highlight some really interesting games or some focus of the mobile platform. So it's fun to talk about it.
Yeah, and I started off designing games for iPad and iPhone. And I think that, Apple Design Awards are a little odd because they're not the best games of the year. But they are often games that spotlight something that Apple really likes, like accessibility or GameKit integration, or it's written in Swift, or occasionally it's just so gratuitously beautiful that you cannot not give it a design award. And I think this year is kind of a combo of all of those. They're not necessarily games that are the first thing you think of when you think of the platform, but they're all really interesting.
Yeah, I think the Apple Design Awards are kind of like, we don't really have a award for best iPhone game of the year. Like, I'm sure Touch Arcade does a game of the year thing once a year, but there's not really a definitive, this is the Oscars of iPhone games or something like that. So this kind of is that de facto award, and it is kind of weird that every year this award is really not for game design. This award is for app and technology and graphic design in video games, which is a weird kind of thing. These are not always the best, most fun games, but they are always something that's this is telling us something about where the platform is going. And iOS as a platform is really important to me, to this show, because a lot of the games we cover are on iOS. Or at the very least, even if it's not necessarily this is where the platform is going, it tells us a lot about where Apple thinks the platform is going in terms of
where they
games.
Want it to go.
Yeah. And
where
sometimes
they're steering it. Yeah.
Very often those lines do cross. There have been some awesome games that have been selected in this. Monument Valley, a iPhone classic, was a winner of this award.
Mm-hmm. Last year awards were really great. Go back and listen to our episode from last year. I wasn't on it, so sadness there. But amazing games like Crossy Road, which was a phenomenon. Does Not Commute, which tells an interesting story in a way that I have never seen before or since in a video game, and has some really fun gameplay, really interesting stuff.
Yeah, I would also say too. Again, they're not always the most fun, but you can tell usually within about a minute of playing an Apple Design Award winning game, why it won the award. I even think of a game from last year, Shadowmatic. It was fine. It was fun, kind of satisfying sometimes, but it was also really, really cool looking, and a graphic style that we'd never really seen able to be done on an iPhone before. And I felt the same way about all the games this year. Started them within a minute or two. I'm like, okay, I see why. Now I'm going to just keep playing through it.
Yeah, and never underestimate the importance of a good hook. All of these games, when you start playing them, not only do you know why they were chosen for a design award, but you tend to see what kind of person would like this game.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more straightforward than a lot of other games on the App Store where you might not see its importance for another 5 levels. These games, right when you open them, what you see on the till is what you get. And I kind of appreciate that.
Yeah. So the first game that won an award this year, an Apple Design Award, and we're not going to talk about all of the things that won Apple Design Awards that aren't games. Obviously, there are some really interesting apps that won some design awards that are not games. We're not going to be discussing those in this episode.
Boring.
Although Streaks is good if you're trying to do something like I like that. Streaks is okay. Anyway,
They're good apps.
they are very good apps. But the first one that was a game that won this year was Chameleon Run. And this is a game that I'd actually been playing. I bought this the first day that it came out because I follow a couple of the developers from Noodle Cake Studios on Twitter. And Noodle Cake has put out some amazing games in the past.
It's a good name, too.
It really
Noodle
is.
Cake.
And actually, I have to give a quick shout out to my favorite game that they've done, which is free to play and has some ads which you can buy your way out of. They right in the aftermath of Flappy Bird, they came out with Flappy Golf, which is genius. It's a great combination of Flappy Bird and golf, but obviously they've created a bunch of other well-known games. I think they made some other golf game that I'm blanking on the name of at the moment.
Well known.
Yes. Anyway, Noodle Cake Games came out with Chameleon Run this year. I think it's their flashiest looking game to date. Really cool looking game. It's also brutally, brutally hard.
Absolutely. I tend to think that I'm really good at like platformers. It's a auto runner. Yeah. We talked actually a little bit about it at the end of last episode, but 2 buttons, jump and switch colors, and it moves so fast. You almost have to memorize the levels. Like you win it on trial and error and just to me, just remembering what's going to come next. It gets so fast that I don't know how you can have the like instincts to just like beat a level on the first couple tries.
Yeah, it takes a lot of repetition and a lot of tries. But a few things about this game that are really neat. First off, it is very pretty for a game like this. It's a sort of 2D presentation, but it's all 3D graphics, and they're incredibly smooth. It's very simplistic, like just your little dude is basically a sphere for a head and some little tubes for a body, and he's running through a world that is entirely rotating solid color rectangles of various sizes. But that said, like it looks slick. Like the animation is constantly at least 60 FPS. It is incredibly slick looking. And I'm pretty sure that one of the reasons that Apple wanted to highlight this game is that it has such incredibly fluid animation. And it's gotta be, I would imagine, using the Metal APIs.
Oh, it's gotta. And something else that I saw when I was hearing about why it won was the developer wanted to develop a game that he could play, and he's colorblind. So he picked these really vivid neon colors that completely changed the look and feel of the game solely so he could see a difference. And I love the energy that those colors he chose give the game. There's so many games that are, poppy, modern, like 1950s modern colors, but this one just goes full neon. And the other thing he said was he wanted a game that he could play one-handed with minimal controls. Apple sometimes loves minimal controls, sometimes loves complicated stuff, but I think the combo of someone who's talking a little bit about accessibility plus all of the multi-touch Siri integration TV stuff he threw in probably push it over the edge.
I think another thing that probably pushed it over the edge in terms of, what Apple is trying to highlight here is that this is a universal game for iPhone, iPad, and also Apple TV, and it supports game controllers on the Apple TV or the Siri remote. And so, even Apple has a page where they list all of their Apple Design Award winners. And if you read their text on it, you can really get an idea of specifically why they chose the games that they did. And this one, the last line of their little description of it says, localized into 8 languages, Chameleon Run looks fantastic on a big screen and supports Game Center. So there you have it. I think they probably chose this because it's accessible. It's accessible to people with, things like color blindness, as you mentioned. It's accessible in 8 languages, and it looks great and works great on the Apple TV. And I think it's the only game among these, the ones that that won Apple Design Awards that is even playable on the Apple TV. So I'm sure that they just felt they had to include at least something on that device.
Yeah, two things on that. First of all, another thing you're leaving out is that your character explodes,
Yes.
and that's always a benefit. It explodes and then starts over almost immediately, which is great. I love a game that is going to kill me a lot, but allow me to jump back in almost immediately after my death. And second of all, if they wanted to, they could localize this game into any language that exists, because there's maybe 10 words total in the whole game, and it's like the tiny little chapter names. Not to knock, I love that they localized it, but like I feel like they could do as many languages as they need to in no time.
And before we move off of this game, I do want to just say this game is incredibly addictive. And yet I have put it down, and that's because like it has an incredibly steep difficulty curve. Every level is hard, but they get really hard.
Really hard.
You hit the wall hard,
Oh, man,
and you
yes.
cannot really get past it.
Yeah, and I am very proud to say that the first, I don't know, there's sort of like collections of levels. I did all of the first collection of levels, and I did all of the achievements or whatever that are a part of that, which requires playing through each one of them dozens of times. And I was really jazzed about it. And then I realized there was a second set of levels, and I was like, nope. And I can't even get past the first level in that second set of levels. And I don't think I ever will. I think I'm done with it. So it's, if a brutally hard auto runner, I love auto runners. I love endless runners. I
Just running.
yeah, I played
You just like running, man.
unbelievable amounts of Alto's Adventure and a bunch of the others. By the way, I 100%
Literally
did Alto's Adventure. Did I tell
unbelievable.
you guys this? Every achievement. But yeah, this game is brutally hard. I won't be finishing it.
No, I too. Again, I feel like I'm really good at games like this, and it's like you have to like brute force it.
Yeah.
But it's only $2.
Yeah.
Money well spent. I think I will. This is a game that I'm going to keep on my iPhone, and just like I'll get it in my head that I'm going to beat this level, and then I'll spend however many times, and then play the next one, die 15 times, be like, okay, not playing this game for a week, and then a week later I'll pick it back up, and eventually, maybe by this time next year, I will complete Chameleon Run.
Yeah, I'm going to give it another try. Now I have an Apple TV, and I have the game controller for it, and I basically never use that thing. But the next time I have some time sitting in front of the Apple TV with nothing better to play, I'm going to try it that way and see if maybe I can get a little farther.
I actually played some Alto's Adventure on my Apple TV last night.
Oh, nice.
It's a very pretty game on a full screen like that.
Again, should have won an Apple Design Award last year. Totally robbed.
Reagan is flashing his Alto's Adventure tattoo that he has right now. It's he got a caribou like on his cheek. It's disgusting.
He
Man.
ships
Are they
it.
Wait, are they caribou?
Yeah, it was really a mistake when I got the caribou and then realized
Llamas.
that they were llamas later. So it was
Yeah,
really
I don't know
embarrassing.
what you were thinking.
Yeah. So the next game that Apple awarded this year was one not from an indie developer, but from a pretty major publisher, Square Enix. And that's Lara Croft Go. I didn't play so much of this one. I played a little bit, but I played more of the one that sort of came before it in this loose series. I played a bit of Hitman Go, but not very much of Lara Croft Go. You guys have played more of it than me. What did you think of it?
Yeah, so it's a kind of a swipey puzzle game where you're going through stage by stage. A little bit of the Monument Valley, like you can go X place and do something and pull a lever and something change the environment. But the difference of Lara Croft Go is you have guns and you can shoot the things in your way. So a lot of times you're sneaking up behind lizards or snakes. Spiders, other different monsters. They all have different behaviors, and the puzzle is to sneak around them, get past them, and get to the goal. I see exactly why they chose it for a design award. I don't know why they chose it for Game of the Year last year, Apple. I kind of disagree on that, but I do see why. I mean, it's beautiful. It's 3D. The whole thing's on this isometric. Turned view, and it's very responsive. You move one step, I mean the animations are smooth, beautiful, and it's taking this Lara Croft and putting it on your phone. So I think just for that, and it still feeling like a Lara Croft game, even though it's step by step, gets him a lot of praise and a lot of goodwill from Apple.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would say like it accomplishes what it's trying to do very, very well. The game is polished, super smooth. There's lots of good little animation flourishes too. Like Lara Croft, they call it turn-based. I mean, the game is like you're technically pretty much walking around on like a grid. Your Lara Croft stays still, and everything in the world stays still until you swipe a movement direction. And when you move a step, like a spider might move a step, like nothing moves unless you're moving. So it does allow you
very
to
slow chess with the environment.
yeah, and some really unique puzzles. I've played very far into the game. It's actually a pretty long game, which I think is another element of it that they made a ton of levels, a ton of stages, and it does progress pretty nicely. Like when you start, you're just getting around snakes, and then they started adding in like lizards, and then spike traps, and then boulders, like classic kind of adventure game. You know, boulder coming down and it's chasing you, or you know it's going in a straight line. You have to evade it, but like the ball doesn't move unless you're moving, so you're like space by space. It's a really pretty game. I've been enjoying it. It is a simple puzzle game, but the puzzles are just tricky enough where you do kind of have to like stop, analyze. Yeah, exactly. You have to analyze the room, find the goal, and then figure out the perfect steps, the perfect movement, arrangement to get to the end. I definitely recommend it if you're looking for a simple puzzle game that it checkpoints at every single puzzle. So you can pull it up, do a couple, put it down. I think it's $4.99.
Currently $2.
Oh, nice.
It's not a game that like I'm like, yeah, like all right, I'm playing some Lara Croft, but it's just like it's satisfying, it's simple, and it looks great. So
I think what's probably most interesting about this game is just that it exists at all, and that this series, like from Square Enix, taking their biggest series and kind of scaling them down for touch-based devices and really rethinking how they play from the ground up. It's just interesting that it exists at all. It kind of makes you think about like, you know, back a few years ago, you know, you look at like when the iPad was brand new, there was a lot of thought that like these touch devices were going to be like a real first-class gaming platform, and that there were going to be like expensive, big deal apps from major major game studios and publishers that were going to be, you know, this was going to be the new consoles, and that didn't really pan out. The market just isn't right for that. But this, I think, actually finds a really interesting niche that's kind of in between. It gets the cachet of these existing big gaming properties. People look at this and say, oh, a Lara Croft game. I can totally, you know, I know that's a thing that's like, those are worth money. They're something that is going to be engaging, and you know, there's going to be some serious game publisher weight behind promoting it. But it's also... it's a touchscreen puzzle game, and you know there are a zillion and 10 of those on the App Store. But this is a really interesting sort of meet in the middle position where these companies aren't going to commit their full weight to making, you know, you're not going to see a $60 or even a $20 big game release on iOS devices, but you can see this $5 game with a big name attached to it. And it could be a big success. I think it's just interesting from a business perspective.
Yeah. Do you think that this like kind of development environment is because of a limitation in hardware, or because of the market of how kind of app development and app sales matured to like, people won't spend more than $1, or it needs to be freemium? Like, what is holding back, you know, major companies from making major games on the phone, on these devices?
I think it's a combination, because you see things like the Infinity Blade series. You have seen ports of stuff like BioShock. You can play BioShock on your iPad.
That's
today.
a good point.
So it's not necessarily a hardware limitation. I think that some of it is that console style games have a much more complex input system. It's not made for touch. I mean, think about the screens you see in Fallout. You're never going to want to play anything like that on an iPad. Like you're not, menu-based systems are just, they suck on touchscreen. And I think that you need something that's pretty simple, pretty intuitive, can be done with multi-touch. And that requires a real rethinking of the current combat system in most combat games or console games.
I think you're right about the combat, because like touchscreens are just straight up bad for negotiating a 3D space in a first person perspective. And so many of the biggest games, or even third person, and so many of the biggest games are really about that. I would kind of beg to differ about menus. Like, I think touchscreens are amazing for choosing things from menus. Like if you're playing, I don't know why there aren't more RPGs, but I think a lot of it just comes down to business reasons. People don't see their touchscreen devices, even their $600 iPad, as a first-class gaming device, and they're not going to I think it might be a bit of a different thing if you could go down to GameStop and buy a disc and stick it into your iPad, but that's literally, I mean, that's a ridiculous idea.
Well, BioShock sold for $5, $10.
Yeah, 99 cents every now and then if you look at the right time.
Which is kind of terrifying for a developer.
But BioShock is 10 years old now.
Yep.
So like that's actually the fact that a 10-year-old game is still even being sold.
How much did they spend on the port, though?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, the port is only a couple of years old. It's I think it really just comes down to, if you're going to make a game and invest an enormous amount of time and developer energy and money in it, and then it appears on the App Store right next to a game that is free or another game that costs 99 cents, it's just, you're going to have a hard time making that pitch to customers.
Yeah, see, that's I think weighing the two, is it hardware or is it environment? I kind of believe the environment is the more has the bigger impact on this type of development, because I think with enough the right mindset and the right budget, somebody could make a crazy, I'm thinking like a JRPG that's like a fully fleshed, and obviously the market for that
there are ports
huge, but
you can see like Square Enix has ported basically all of the Dragon Quest games and a bunch of the Final Fantasy games, and they hold firm on prices that are above $10 for each game, and they sell. But you have to be a Square Enix in order to pull that on the App Store, and even then, if you look at the reviews for those games, it is nothing but people bitching about the price. So
and that's the environment.
Yeah.
Like it's, you look at the App Store and, you go to top charts free, I bet is the most looked at thing on the App Store. And sure, most of those games end up not being free. You're paying somehow, which I'm not even saying is a bad thing. It's just kind of how the system works. So I don't know if we'll ever see major game development outside of, I guess, like games like Clash of Clans and stuff like that are where a lot of the direction is going. The like pseudo social kind of game,
Those have never engaged me at all. And I mean, if you enjoy those games, like good for you. I know a lot of people that I follow on Twitter were actually pretty enthusiastic about, for example, like Clash Royale, which came out this year, probably the most high profile iPhone game release of the year so far. And I'm just not interested in that stuff. I think that we're never going, just the way that things are going, I don't think there's really anything that can be done at this point to make smartphones or like touchscreen devices like iPads real first-class gaming platforms. I just really hope that doesn't mean that portable games as a market dry up entirely. Like you look at the PlayStation Vita, which has some really cool games, interesting stuff still comes out on it, but there's no Vita 2 on the horizon, and it's getting a little long in the tooth and is lacking a lot in developer support. And something like the Nintendo 3DS, similar kind of story there. It's getting towards the end of its life. We just don't know what's coming next. We may end up in a situation where there really isn't a kind of A-class portable game experience And all we're left with when we're playing portable games are these smaller experiences that are like, I'm not even talking about like big budget stuff. I'm talking about just like good indie games that focus on gameplay and aren't about, collecting gems.
As long as Nintendo is keeping Pokemon entirely in house, there will always be a Nintendo handheld device.
That is true.
But the people behind Ingress, Niantic Studios, are putting out a
Pokemon Go
location-based Pokemon game.
I know. I signed up for the beta for that, and I have not been invited yet. But
I'm actually looking forward to checking it out, but I don't know what's going to become of that.
There's never been a more misleading commercial than the Pokemon Go commercials against what the actual. It's like a Jack in the Box taco commercial to what Jack in the Box tacos actually look like is what the Pokemon Go commercials are. And I'm super hyped about the game, but they're like
level 4 in Ingress. Like, there's no way that Pokemon Go is anything like those commercials.
It's insane. They're like in towns. They're in like downtown New York, Times Square. They're like in Times Square, like fighting a Mewtwo. Everyone's on their phones, like, holy shit! I'm like, that's not how. Like, I love that.
It's not how any of this
like,
works.
That commercial, it gets me like a million times, like in the heartstrings. I'm like, that's all I've ever wanted. But like, I know that's not what that game is going to be. It's going to be looking at your phone and the augmented reality thing where you like never really works like you want it to. Hopefully I hope they pull it off, but like
I collected all of the Pokemon in the Google Maps April Fool's game.
Oh my God, I forgot about that. That was really neat.
Yeah, like, and I hope they do it globally. Like, I would love it if there's Pokemon that are like in the real desert and you have to be like in the desert to get it. Like I have high hopes for the concept of the game. Those commercials are just way, way misleading.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I think it's going to be an interesting year for iOS games.
Can we talk about my favorite design award?
Oh, yes. Okay, so we saved the best for last, and then we actually do have a few more to talk about with the student winners, but Inks.
Inks is the best game if you want to be better at pinball and you want to do it in a beautiful, messy way. It's got this... So it's a pinball training game, is how I think of it. You play a pinball game and you occasionally hit these kind of pockets of color that then splash ink across. And as your ball passes through it, it leaves these gorgeous trails. So by the end of the game, you have this kind of map of what you did. And it's a little shameful because if you miss the ball too many times, your ball gets colored black. And then suddenly your entire map is just a sad, black, scriggly mess. But most of the time, if you play well, it is just really soothing and gorgeous. And it's kind of a pinball puzzle game. I really dig it.
I dig it too. And it's funny because when I first tried it out, I didn't so much get it. I really like pinball games. We did a whole episode on pinball video games on this show where I was pretty much the only one talking. And like I was basically chewing Shane's ear off, telling him about all of my favorite pinball video games. By the way, you should all go play Rollers of the Realm, which is so good and didn't get enough credit. But anyway, go back and listen to that episode if you're interested in my yammering about pinball video games. When I first played this game, my kind of thought on it was like, oh, that's it? Like, there's not a lot going on here. Every pinball table is the size of your phone screen and really has just like 4 or 5 targets for you to hit. And it's extremely small. And it's not flashy looking at first until the ink of all of those targets gets sort of spread around. But it does just look really, really realistically like ink on paper. And your ball is like hitting these ink pockets and bursting them, and the color explodes out of them. The ball gets coated. It leaves trails around. And that's cool looking, but I think it was when Laura described the game as a pinball training game that I kind of really figured out like like my perspective on the game changed, and I actually really started enjoying it. At first I thought, this is way too simple. There's not enough going on here. Where's my score? You know, like I was kind of acing every table after like 3 or 4 tries and moving on to the next one. And I didn't get that feeling of trying the same thing dozens and dozens of times and progressively getting better at it. But then I realized, like, oh yeah, it's a training game. You're learning to make trick shots. Every one of these little tables is just a very specific little pinball trick shot. And the ink mechanic isn't just eye candy. It looks awesome, but it really is all about showing you the path of your ball. You know, once your ball starts getting exactly, you know, once your ball starts getting covered in ink, it leaves these trails behind it that kind of tell you, oh, I can see there's a great big glob of ugly colored ink here because I'm constantly hitting this at the wrong angle and my ball keeps ending up there. It's really interesting. And once I started thinking about it as a pinball trainer rather than as just like a full-fledged pinball game, it made a lot more sense.
So I mentioned I played this first at work during a particularly hard day, and the designers just flocked around my phone and were staring at it and being like, oh my God, the colors are so pretty. And they loved the sounds. Everyone saw it as kind of a meditative thing. If you're not a designer, maybe you're not going to be quite as excited about ink mixing as those people were. But I will say that State of Play did the cutout paper game Lumio City, I believe.
Lumino, yeah.
Lumino.
That's been on our list for ages, and we still haven't managed to do an episode on it, but it's definitely recommended. It's really, really pretty too. But it's a more sort of traditional like puzzle adventure game, I guess.
Yeah, but it just shows that they like dealing with physical objects in a digital world. So I'm really intrigued by what they do next.
I would love to see these mechanics kind of expanded into a more full-fledged pinball game. Like they clearly nail the pinball physics, and they have some really clever ideas here. I would love to see more of this, and I haven't beaten all of its levels yet. I was trying to get like, you get different levels with different like you can get a gold star or a silver or a bronze or black, and black just means you are, you know,
died
you
too
just
many times,
barely past the minimum requirements for this level, and you're garbage. But I've been trying to get at least like silver or gold on every single level, and I'm about halfway through, I think, and still enjoying it. Still pull it out every now and then to try a little bit, another table or two. So definitely recommended. My favorite as well of this year's ADA award-winning selections.
It's funny. So pinball is something that I've never cared about. Honestly, the last time I can remember really loving a pinball game was a terrible game called Sonic Spinball that I had.
One of my least favorite, actually.
I know, right? But I had it for Sega when it was a game for Sega, playing it on my Sega. And I played it all the damn time, and I loved that game. And I know now, as you know, I recognize that it was a bad game, but I played so much Sonic Spinball.
Oh man, there are some really, really good pinball games from that era. If you
Pokemon
Pinball is like really
it's
decent.
Great. Yeah.
But there's a for the Genesis, there's a game called, I'm going to butcher the name now. It's actually a port of a TurboGrafx 16 game. And I'm going to mix up their names, so I'm going to look it up.
If you guys ever want to see something super pathetic, so I've got some like weird eye issues, and one of them is that like it's hard for me to track small, quick moving things. So whenever I play pinball, it's basically watch Nate just hit the flippers, hope that I kind of hit the ball when it's in the area. But I put in the 50 cents and I'm dead within like 30 seconds because I just like can't track the ball quick enough, and I just die immediately.
I'm a lot better in person than I am on digital.
Yeah, okay, here it is. Sorry. It was Dragon's Fury, which is a port of the TurboGrafx 16 game Devil Crush. I guess they took the devil out.
Those were hard words.
They didn't like to make games with devil or things like that in the name back in those days. But Dragon's Fury for the Genesis is a fantastic pinball game from that era, and really makes Sonic Spinball look like really clunky by comparison.
Yeah. And you guys talked about it on the pinball episode, but we're getting like on a crazy tangent on this. But I just have to say, if you want a really interesting story, read the history of pinball in America. Read about the history of pinball in America. It is crazy. like where it started and what it became, and then like what it is now. It was illegal. Like they were like burning pinball. My favorite fun fact about pinball is the reason the Fonz and Happy Days always played pinball was because that at that time was like a sign of like a bad bad guy. Like you were like. Yeah, like you were like don't care about the law, like badass if you played pinball. And then like now, we watch and he kind of looks goofy. He's like, hey, come on, and like hits the pinball machine. But like for that time, everyone would be like, ooh, look at that.
He's so dope.
Yeah, exactly.
Laura, I'm taking away your cool points for that one.
He's so dope. Mm-hmm. Do I have cool points? When did I get cool points?
I gave them to you and then reclaimed them. We should probably quickly mention the two student winners of Apple Design Awards this year. And I went ahead and played both of these. Every year, Apple gives out. They don't seem to have a set number of design awards that they give out, but it's always, I think, 2 student awards. There's less games winning this year than last, and there were even more games in the year before that. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but this year the 2 Apple Design Award winners for students were Linum by Joaquin Villa, I'm guessing at the name there, and Divider by Josh Diekman, Patrick Pistor, and Eric Leidick, I think. Yes. Okay. So those are the names, and I played both of these. Linum is a puzzle game, and I think with both of these, it's pretty clear why they awarded them. First off, Linum is really attractive. It's very simple. It's a puzzle game where you're presented with some lines with little joints in them, and you have to tap the joints of the lines to kind of tick the lines to rotate in various different directions to kind of connect various different points. You're kind of like, imagine kind of like moving the hands of a clock, but the hands of the clock are attached to other hands of clocks, attached to other hands of clocks, and you're trying to kind of get them to rotate into particular shapes. And it's a pretty good little puzzle game. It seems like they have a lot of levels, and it starts very, very simple and eventually ramps up very smooth, kind of shallow difficulty curve. I think probably why they awarded this game was that it uses a lot of Apple's kind of newer or more sort of fancy features for developers. So according to the description on the Apple Design Awards page, it uses UI view animations, core data, storage kit, replay kit, and game center. So basically ticking all the boxes of things that Apple is interested in people incorporating or using in their games. While also being pretty attractive. Like, it's a very good-looking game.
Did Apple tell them that they were getting rid of Game Center before? Which I think we should probably talk about now. I mean, it is an interesting move on Apple's side to once
honestly,
iOS 10 comes out.
Finally.
It makes sense.
It's Game Center was such a good idea, handled so badly, that I think a retreat from it is the only possible course. Just for folks who don't play a lot of iPhone games, I guess wow, how did you get this deep into this episode? But to kind of recap the problems with Game Center, when Xbox Live was like the talk of everyone, and the idea of having a buddy list of people you could play with across games was still a kind of a new and interesting idea. Steam buddy lists, for example, was still like, wow, I can just make friends with someone one time and then I don't have to configure my ports to play games with them across things. And it was a kind of early stages. We're talking like iOS 5, I think. They added Game Center, which let you create a list of friends and then use that list of friends in games across the platform, across iOS, which seemed like a really good idea. And they've continued to add more features onto it, things like some options to use it as the backbone for turn-based games so that you don't have to run your own servers or don't have to completely run all your own servers for everything. Don't have to set up your own account system for handling multiplayer. Don't have to host your own service for doing leaderboards, that kind of thing. But the problem
challenges, achievements, all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, achievements. Yeah, the big problem with Game Center is that it's never really worked reliably. It's been an inconsistent mess. There are some folks who have for years not been able to use Game Center on phones that otherwise work perfectly fine, with Apple IDs that otherwise work perfectly fine. It's just been a really inconsistent mess. And it's always kind of felt like this abandoned property. Like Apple has a Game Center icon on your home screen when you buy a brand new game, but most people never touch it because it's not widely used. It hasn't been a success. And so I think it makes sense to kind of take that icon off the home screen. I think what they're going to end up doing is kind of keeping some of those features around, but kind of pushing them off to the side and making them just sort of basic OS level features rather than kind of under a big headline brand like Game Center.
Well,
Yeah,
it's becoming
now you
Game
actually invite-
Kit. Oh, I'm sorry. It's becoming a back-end tool set called Game Kit, much like you have all the other Home Kit, all those other things.
Yeah, so you might, if you invite someone to a game, it actually sends them a text message with a link using GameKit features, but it's going to feel a little bit more native rather than this weird third-party thing that's buggy.
I would have rather them actually put the resources behind it and make Game Center a functioning full-on thing than get rid of it. It obviously wasn't working in the in its state as it was, but I really liked being able to go on to Game Center and look at all the stupid games I'm playing and how much better I'm doing than all my friends.
Oh, I love that. I love seeing that I beat, Reagan for Tiny Wings and things like
There
that.
was about a month period where I made it when Reagan was talking about Alto's adventure every single time we met. We're kind of back at that point, actually. But when Alto first came out, I mean, that was like all, and he would just post his scores over and over. So it's like, well, I'm going to do what I can to make sure he's not leading in any other game on Game Center. So I was just downloading games that I could see Reagan's score on, and just to try to beat those scores. And I did. I felt really good about it. Even stupid games like Pancake. It was satisfying.
Your Pancake score was very impressive.
It was very good. Thank you. Crossy Road as well.
At the same time, Justin has been kicking everybody's ass at threes for months, and Game Center's buggy, and it's not posting his top score. So he is
that's the
30K ahead of all of us, and that for some godforsaken reason isn't showing up in threes.
Yeah.
So I feel like that is really disappointing if you work really hard to get a high score.
And that's why it's
that you
not
can't
perfect.
show off.
Yeah.
I really liked that side of it. And that's
worked
what
to
makes
be
me
perfect.
bummed for it to go away. I liked the idea of Game Center because of these stupid games that we all get super addicted to, play for 2 weeks and then throw away. Like, it's fun to see, like, oh, Laura is also playing this stupid game that that was recommended to me. And there's like fad games that everyone plays for, sometimes like 3 days before it goes away. Like, it was fun to have that connection with everyone and see how you were doing. It didn't work all the time, and it was kind of hard to get to, and the UI is crappy, but like the concept of it, I really liked it. So I'm bummed to see it go away entirely.
I am bummed that there won't be a central place to look at leaderboards like that. It seems like most of the key features are sticking around. For example, I'm pretty sure that you'll still be able to host a leaderboard that's based on this Game Kit thing that this is turning into. It's just going to be siloed into your app. It's not going to be something that you can look at in a system-wide feature that includes all games. And I'll kind of miss that, but I don't think I'll miss it as much as all that. Like, it just...
Yeah, I mean, it would be like the example that I think of too that was really fun about it. And I think this can still exist within games, and I imagine that it will. But like, in Crossy Road, I'm just playing, and then there's like a dotted white line with someone's one of my friends on Game Center. It's their high score, and now it's on my screen, and I know when
and they
I
didn't
beat
have to
them.
send you that high score or challenge
Exactly.
you or anything. It's just there.
It just
and
existed in the game.
I agree.
And I think that will still exist on GameKit in the back end. Like, they can integrate that because that's a really cool feature. But it would also be fun to I like to be able to go and look at like, what high score did Reagan just get in a game that I don't even have? Oh, he got this. Okay, I'm going to download it and commit the next 2 hours to taking Reagan down from the inside.
Speaking of Game Center, the other game that's a student winner also uses Game Center and a few other key things. Divider, and that's using official startup spelling, DIVIDR. Divider is a action arcade game, So rather than a puzzle game like the other. And the one thing that this does that I think is kind of cool is it's really based on 3D touch, or at least if you have a 3D touch device, it's very based on 3D touch. You control a little dot that's at the bottom of the screen, and a series of kind of walls are coming towards you. And if you press down on the screen, in a very analog way, it senses how much pressure you're putting on the screen. And based on the amount of pressure, your little one dot splits up into two dots and navigates through holes in the walls that are coming towards you. It's just a very simple, very, it's a basic but pretty addictive little 2D action arcade game. And I think that Apple probably awarded this game because it's fun and it's really well done, but also it's entirely written in Swift and makes heavy use of that 3D touch. And I really wish that more games would make more use of 3D touch because it gives you a sort of analog feel that you don't get from basic on-screen touchscreen buttons.
Yeah, and it plays okay if you don't have 3D touch. I don't. I have an iPhone 5S, and basically it just does length of time. It doesn't destroy the game, but it's interesting for a game that uses 3D touch and makes it available on non-6 Plus devices. I kind of want to see a game that just goes completely whole 3D touch is completely required. I was surprised this played at all on my phone.
I actually don't think that's possible according to the App Store guidelines at this point.
Really?
Because I don't think you can restrict your. Now, I'm not a developer and I'm not always up to date on this stuff. So, if I'm wrong, I guess, email me. But if you, I'm pretty sure that you can restrict your device, your app to things like size classes. But I don't think that you can restrict a device. You can restrict your app to downloads or purchases based on whether the device has 3D touch or not. I don't think that's something you can do
I know you
yet.
can on hardware limitations. Yeah, I mean, from my experience, it was more of you can set the lower boundary of the oldest device it's available for. So you could probably say, will that run? Sometimes it's been based on chips, sometimes it's the latest. I'm just curious that if 3D touch becomes so integral to the game, kind of like when front-facing camera became important to the game, and games without a front-facing camera couldn't do it. There's a lot of things that sometimes Apple will come up with new device requirements that are integral, and I'm surprised that this game used 3D touch but didn't make it a requirement.
Well, Apple is still selling brand new phones that are like completely new, like the new what's the new version of the 5S
SE,
called?
yeah.
The SE.
SE.
That just came out, no 3D touch. And so I think Apple probably doesn't want people to make apps or games probably that absolutely strictly require 3D touch. I still think they kind of think of it as an extra for, making things better experiences or giving you shortcuts rather than something that they want whole experiences devised around.
Yeah.
As someone who's actively designing for iPhone, not making 3D touch a requirement means that you don't put it in apps.
Yeah.
Well, the thing with 3D touch too is that so I got a 6S on like a week after launch, and it's a great phone, upgraded from my 5S, all that. I was very excited about 3D touch. It's a new dimension. It's expanding what you can do with the screen. I virtually never use it on the operating system. And my thought was, I was really excited about it for the operating system, never use it. It's at least I'll probably get games with it because it's expanding the tool set. Touchscreen is so limited. It's at least now we have another type of touch that people can develop around. And I think that will come. But I do think people are afraid, even if there's no limitations on held by Apple, it also makes sense from just the developer's point of view to not base a game around something that only a fraction of the people will have. You need everyone to buy your game.
Yeah, especially when SE came out without 3D touch, it was kind of putting a nail in a coffin in my mind.
Yeah. And I wish that games would focus on it. There's so many places where, even just something like a driving game, there are you could make a driving game on the iPhone and essentially make the 3D Touch your accelerator, and then you'd be able to drive more than one speed. That would be an amazing interaction, but it doesn't
There's a
seem
lot
to be
of cool things. I mean, you could do whatever you want with it. It's an additional input.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's going to have to be maybe once the 7 or whatever, when we're a couple generations into 3D Touch.
Got to be built into more phones.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's funny though, like things like the ramp up for folks making Retina apps, that happened almost immediately, and that was at a time when there were just a handful of, like, there were a lot of phones out there. Most of them didn't have Retina screens, but practically overnight, it seemed like all the apps had Retina graphics.
But making something look pretty.
Yeah.
We said this exact same sentence. That, like, it's fun to optimize to make stuff look nice, but like a utility within the game, like a button, it'd be like, you know, because I mean, I think it would almost like, right, you know, normally on the phone you have an A button and a B button. Magic Touch, 3D Touch is giving you a C button, you know, and then if you built the game around the C button being a major part, but a lot of people still only had A and B, that'd be a problem. But like, just making A and B look a lot nicer, you know, that makes a lot more sense to push out to as many people.
Yeah, it's sort of the same problem that I think they're running into with the Apple TV, where they want everybody, they want to make sure that people can buy fancy game controllers for the thing, but they also want to make sure that everyone who doesn't have a fancy game controller can still play the games, and so you have to make these games that essentially work on a one-button input like the Siri remote. But then if you have this game controller, then you can do other stuff. You're designing for like two so completely different input methods. So yeah, I get where you're coming from. I just sort of wish it were not so.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I would love to be using 3D Touch in my designs, but no one is going to pay to do it when it's not the default, when it's not on all systems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we'll get there. You know, it'll eventually, I think it'll be on everything. But with the SE having come out just so recently, I kind of feel like that's going to take a lot longer than I initially thought. So we talked about all the games that won Apple Design Awards. Before we wrap up, do you guys want to talk a little bit about some games that we think maybe deserved Apple Design Awards, or at least some other recognition that didn't make it this year?
This might not deserve a visual design, but from a game mechanic design, Downwell is just spectacular. And I understand, I don't think it's innovating in a new UI toolkit, or it's definitely not using 3D Touch, not using Metal, but it is so smooth and addictive and perfect for one-handed play.
I can't imagine how you play that one-handed. I can't play it one-handed.
I mean, you need to go right and left, but
yeah,
you can kind of play one-handed. You'll just die a lot.
Yeah, it's perfect for playing standing up, you know, and not really focusing. But yeah, my God, one-handed, I could not handle that. But Downwell, I think, is my iPhone game of the year for the year since. That actually came out in late 2015, but it's certainly since the last Apple Design Awards. I think it was in October of 2015, and Downwell is an amazing game, plays amazingly well on the iPhone. But even that, I actually think, like, I bought that for my Vita as well, and having buttons, huge plus. Like, I'm much better at it there because I have buttons, even though it does such a great job of implementing the sort of touch controls. I think the game that I think is the game of the year of iPhone games since the last Apple Design Awards was Spider, Rite of the Shrouded Moon. We did an episode on it, so I won't belabor the point here, but Rite of the Shrouded Moon is fantastic. It brought back everything that I loved about Spider, the first one. It's richer and deeper as an experience. That game is absolutely great. So if you missed out on it, because it came out in August of 2015, definitely go back and play Spider, Rite of the Shrouded Moon. It's also out on Steam and PlayStation now, too.
I think Apple's bad about giving awards to sequels, because Badlands 2 came out this year and it was gorgeous. The Room 3 came out and it was just such a good evolution of that game. I don't know if they have ever rewarded a sequel.
That's a good point. In a sense, Lara Croft Go is a sequel to Hitman Go, but it's really more of like that series is very interesting. It's a Go sequel, but certainly not a Lara Croft Go sequel.
We cannot forget the single biggest hit of 2015, Neko Atsume.
Oh
Kitty
yeah,
collector.
man. My wife went nuts for that game and played a ton of it, and so I'm very familiar with it, although I haven't played it at all myself. But it's cute.
Oh, I played a lot of it, and Molly also is still playing it. A couple people in my group have 100%ed the game, and that's including the recent updates. Like they're adding new kitties and new things. So it would not actually win, but it's a game that I spent a lot of time on.
In making our list of games that we thought that, maybe should have deserved an award that weren't recognized, I have to admit that this year has been a bit light for great iOS games. Like, there have been a few really good ones. Downwell is a particularly good example, but, like, last year, at the end of the episode, like, I wasn't on it, but, there was a lot of talk about what a great year it had been for iOS games. This year, not so much. I don't know if I can point to a cause or if we kind of have already been talking about some of the challenges that the platform faces as a gaming thing, but gosh, it's been a weird year for iPhone games.
Yeah, well, I think there's two different things that we're trying to qualify here or quantify. There's games that would win the Apple Design Award, and then there's really good iPhone games. And I think that there's been plenty of fine, fun, engaging iPhone games, but they're all kind of iteratives of themselves. They're different versions of things that we're already used to. Really unique and well-designed and very interesting games. This year, there does seem to be less than maybe the year before.
Yeah. I'm not sure if that's like reflective of the, people were doing a lot of hand wringing about the indie apocalypse, and there's some truth to that kind of thing, but also I think it's often been a little bit overblown. But on iOS, it really has been a year of consolidating behind big brands like Hearthstone and the Clash of Clans and things like that. And I haven't seen as many like tiny little like there's a few that have stood out that I was like, oh, what a great game. But even like I really enjoyed a game this year called Tower of Masks, I think. And I'll put a link in the show notes if I got the name wrong. But like Tower of Masks, super neat little arcade style one-handed play.
Tomb of
Masks. Thank you, Tomb of the Mask. Super good game. But it has these, I would say, almost kind of abusive like free-to-play mechanics that eventually made me quit the game. So like there's. And I was really enjoying it, but I eventually got so tired of seeing advertisements that I quit playing it. So like we're like a weird stage for this stuff now.
Yeah. Or like a great game like Warbits. We did a full episode on it. We love that game. I'm still playing that game. I really, really love that game. But when we're talking about like game of the year, design, it's just a really well put together game. I don't know if I would put it. It's essentially a remake in a way of a popular game from Advanced Wars, right? So I don't know. I mean, I also think we should couch all this and say that there's a possibility that the three of us have just missed some really great games.
Yeah,
so
totally.
If anyone out there is listening and just sitting there like, you idiots, you haven't talked about this game, or I can't believe you forgot about it, please let us know, because I do not want to make a sweeping statement and say like 2016 has been bad for iOS games, because like there's been a lot of great games that I've loved.
I just don't think there's been any games that everyone has rallied around. Like there's no game like Alto's Adventure. Inks is the closest we have had to everyone suddenly covering a game at the same time.
Yeah, there hasn't been an 80 Days or a Monument Valley this year,
Yeah, and I think there's been games that I've loved that are small, like the people who made Tiny Thief, which is this little adorable point-and-click adventure game, which unfortunately is not supported. I don't think it works currently on iOS 10. But they made a game called Love You to Bits, which is about your robot girlfriend explodes and you have to go collect pieces of her. It's adorable. And there's also games like The Beggar's Ride, which is this weird platformer that sometimes has dicey controls, but you are basically this beggar who gets masks that give you godlike powers, which is such an incredible... That sounds like a console game, but it's about 2 to 3 hours, and it's on iOS, and it's beautiful. And there's King Rabbit, which I know you played a lot of, right?
Yeah. That's really cute, and it's a good little puzzle game. And but yeah, it doesn't feel like something that like really draws attention to itself in the way that some of the things we talked about last year or the year before did, like Monument Valley, for example. There's
just they feel like hidden gems, and they don't feel like hidden gems that are screaming for attention. Like Threes, when I played it, I knew every single person that I met would love it. Same thing with Monument Valley. Same thing with Alto's Adventure. And I don't think there's been games that, no matter how near and dear they are to my heart, that I am positive everyone's going to love. And everyone, if you haven't played Executive, you really still...
Oh, I was about to say, except for the Executive.
Which everyone should play, even though it came out last July.
Yeah, the Executive definitely pretty good. So yeah, if you have a game that you think, listener, if you have a game that you think that we missed this year, that you think should have won an Apple Design Award, or just otherwise is like the awesome game of... Now, when we're talking about this year, we're kind of talking about since last summer because of the way the timing of this works. But if you've played a game since last summer that you think is amazing and that we haven't talked about yet, drop us a line. And you can do that at our website, www.theshortgame.net. We have a contact form there, or you can write us at info@theshortgame.net, or you can write to us on Twitter @_shortgame. Before we wrap up, one thing I wanted to mention here, by the time you hear this episode, it will probably already have begun, but Laura and I are planning The Short Game's very first video content. We are going to do we have a Twitch stream planned. We're going to be playing Hadean Lands by Andrew Plotkin.
Not a short game.
No, not a short game.
Not an easy game.
After that, I'm doing a full video stream of Skyrim from the beginning to the end, all the DLC.
Well, I guess we're kind of doing it because it's a game that I have started a little bit and thought was ingenious, but couldn't get very far with, and I wanted to enlist the help of excellent puzzle solver Laura. And so, Laura, you are tasked with figuring this out for me.
I'll try to solve all the problems. We'll see. I mean, I do a lot of puzzles in my free time, but that does not mean I'm necessarily going to be excellent at alchemy, but we will find out.
We shall see. So if you want to keep up with that, it's probably going to be a multi-part thing. It's going to be on Twitch, on my Twitch channel, which I am still in the process of setting up, so watch my Twitter for a link, or watch the show's Twitter. And so if you want to keep up with that, it'll be there, and we'll probably also have it on YouTube, probably, and we'll maybe figure out a way to get it to you in audio form as well, if it ends up being something that's worth doing in that way. We'll figure that out, but it'll be new. It'll be the first time that The Short Game has tried anything like this, so keep an eye out for it. And if you want to keep an eye out for it, the best way to do that is to follow me on Twitter. I've been your host, Reagan Kelly, and you can find me on Twitter @ReaganK. That's RayGanK. Laura, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter @LauraJNash.
And Nate, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter @NateSTL. And do we know what we're playing next? Do we want to say it?
We do. Board games. Party games and board games. Because we have a schedule now.
Yes. We are getting better with the whole scheduling thing. Our next episode, as Laura said, is going to be about board games. If you have a favorite board game that you think we ought to check out, let us know. We did a board game special years ago now, seems like. I think like 2+ years ago. I think
it was like episode number 7 or something like that. Yeah,
Laura, that was before you came on the show, right?
So, yep, I think Siba was on it.
Oh yeah. Oh man, seems like an age ago. So we're going to talk about what board games we've played in the last 2 years. If you have a favorite board game, let us know about that too. And thank you so much for joining us on The Short Game.